Un, dos. E cubo cai em bateria. Não, mas puxa, mas põe um outro cabo aqui dentro. Sim. Tudo quatro tem. Tudo tem bateria não. Tudo está claro. One, two. Un, dos. One, two. Un, dos. One, two. Un, dos. É por tá. É por. Ah? Kiko. É tá roupa Kiko. É delay? É delay. De 5 segundos. E a pessoa está aí. Mi hör inte 16 sekunder lá. Se porque as põe pé. Dale bere. Um, dois. Ah. Essa aqui é bateria para mim. Diz que tem. É da pagar, mas diz que tem na zona. Well, um corá. Quem me salva o corá de biá? Mostrando? 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Super, zeg je blauw. Super, dit is een D. No, maar kan je toekomen? Oh, dat is een D kom. Wat die kort zijn die zijn op je oor. 1, 2. 1, 2.
Personas, persona me separa alto arriba. Okay. Si persona muove? Okay, perfetto. Good morning. My name is Deborah Alexander, and we're waiting for the arrival of the governor. I would just like to ask you to please turn off your phones. I think that's most important. Please turn off your I would like to ask you to all rise for the arrival of His Excellency, the Governor of Aruba, Alfonso Boekhout.
Bon dia. My name is Jim Randall. I'm the chair of the Conference Planning Committee, and it's my pleasure to be here in Aruba. What I'd like to do just over the next few minutes, I'm the master of ceremonies for this morning's event, but what I'd like to do is first just welcome the dignitaries who have arrived here and then tell you what the morning is going to look like. So that what you can expect in the morning. First of all, I'd like to welcome the Governor of Aruba, Alfonso Boekhout. I'd also like to welcome the Prime Minister of Aruba, Evelyn Wever-Croes. We also have with us a guest, the Prime Minister of Saint Maarten, Leona Romeo Marlin, welcome here. We have a representative from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Where is our representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands? Mr. Erwin Arkenbout. The Minister of Education, I believe, has joined us as well from Aruba. Mr. Armando Lampe. Did I get that correct? We have a senator who has joined us from the United States Virgin Islands, Ms. Alison de Gaison, and the rector of the University of Aruba, who I've known now for just a year or so, and I think we've become quite good friends, Dr. Glenn Thodé. There are other keynote speakers as well who are in the front row, Dr. Godfrey Baldacchino, Dr. Peter Clegg, who you'll hear from later in this conference. And I'll also, I have an opportunity to give some welcome remarks in just a moment, and at that time I'm going to make a point of thanking the sponsors, for which we would not have this conference would not be possible without those sponsors, and I'll go into more detail on those sponsors in just a moment. But more specifically. But I also want to make sure that for those of you, unlike myself, who are more savvy about social media, please recognize that you can look at this conference in Facebook, add to the conference in Facebook and in Instagram. And I've been told that the Twitter hashtag for the conference is Island Stories. And so if you wanted to add to that, you're more than welcome. I probably would not read it myself, but many other millions of people in the world will read that. The order of the morning itself, we're going to have several welcomes. A welcome from the rector of this university. I will come back up on stage and provide a few additional words. And then a welcome from the representative from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. There will then be an Aruban welcome with several local cultural and artistic groups. We'll have a keynote address from the Prime Minister of Aruba. Then there will be a group photo, and so that means everyone here who is attending the conference will get together and have a group photo outside in the patio. There will then be a break, and I think we would intentionally build breaks into here, many breaks into here, because I think one of the important things is not just the content, but rather the development of relationships and communication between people. So you'll have a lot of time to get to know people and start forming those friendships or furthering those friendships. And then the first set of papers will start after that. So I'll stop my comments right there. And perhaps I'll ask the rector from the University of Aruba to come up and give his welcoming remarks.
Let me join Jim in first saying Bombini, which is welcome in Papiamento, the language we speak here in Aruba. And on behalf of the organizing committee, the organizers of this event, and of course the University of Aruba community, I welcome you all to this conference for sharing stories of island life, using the hashtag if it's Twitter, and governance and global engagement also. Once more, Bombini na Aruba y nos Universidad. This conference came to Aruba as a result of the fragility of islands. The University of Prince Edward Island, also represented in the person of Jim, was planning to hold a similar conference together with the University of St. Maarten in 2017. And unfortunately, one of the strongest hurricanes to go through the Caribbean hit St. Maarten with its center before the conference took place. The hurricane destroyed the capacity of the St. Maarten infrastructure to host this event there at that time. The recovery of St. Maarten is also taking some time. This shows the vulnerabilities and challenges islands and their inhabitants and their institutions face. For us, this meant that the University of Prince Edward Island approached the University of Aruba to explore our ability and willingness to co-organize this event here in Aruba. I am really sorry St. Maarten missed this opportunity. But as the St. Maarten Prime Minister is here today, I wish to express that I have confidence that the resilience I have seen on that island shortly after the hurricane will make it possible to host such an event in the near future. We are willing to offer support in the ways possible for us to make that possible. As islands, we can form a strong community when we gather our strengths and share. It can be calculated that about 730 million people live on islands, which translates into about 11% of the world population. This can be a significantly strong community if we can overcome geographical separation by water and other distinguishing features like languages and different cultures. But the modern world, with new technologies and know-how, certainly offers opportunities to do so. To me, this conference can be of fundamental significance in the development of academia in Aruba and our region. It can be particularly impactful in the development of island studies as an emerging academic discipline of thinking with those attending. Because of this, I am very thankful for the opportunity that our University of Aruba got to collaborate with the University of Prince Edward Island and those involved in the organizing committee to make the idea of this conference come to life. Glancing over the subjects submitted to the conference, I become better aware of the value of the island perspective. Being more isolated than most continental communities are, island communities somehow evoke particular phenomena, triggering peculiar developments and practices which might be more attenuated in larger and less isolated communities. This is the case with small island developing states, or SIDS, but also in subnational island jurisdictions, as is the case for Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Maarten. Questions like the balance between dependence, independence, interdependence gain more traction and can be studied in finer detail. The challenges surrounding regional or global solidarity become apparent when faced with phenomena like disasters, diasporas, legal transplants. Reflecting on all of this, I can see that islands can be breeding grounds for solutions not developed elsewhere. These solutions could have global benefits if adapted elsewhere. An island like Aruba is a model of unity in diversity, for instance. What if we could model this phenomenon and scale it to fit other communities, even continent-based ones? Then another subject. Most of us are trained in a specific scientific or academic discipline, which was originally developed in a large and probably aged institution in Europe or the United States. Some of you might be working at a smaller island-based institution like this University of Aruba. Well, what about the thought process, the way in which we structure and order our thoughts and arguments, the method we use for constructing that stuff we call knowledge? One of the hopes I have, and one of the reasons why I'm really happy this conference takes place at this university on this island in this moment, is that our interaction will stimulate critical thinking about our relationship with knowledge. When I was growing up, I was taught by my family to relate in certain ways to nature, to community, to myself, and to acquire certain skills that were very relevant for survival on an island in their time. Then I went to school, and this learning was replaced by book learning. By staring at ink on paper, I suddenly replaced most of what my family taught me about island living with thoughts imported in the books I was studying. This knowledge, referred to as Western scientific knowledge, replaced the local knowledge my family had instilled in me through oral traditional learning. I was taught to value the Western knowledge as superior to the local knowledge. Island studies opened my mind back to not see any of these knowledge systems as superior and the other as inferior, but to consider these as different ways to relate to our communities and to our surroundings, especially on these islands. The principles and insights gained through Western scientific knowledge, combined with the pacing, scaling, and coloring aspects of local knowledge, might lead to better fitting and sustainable solutions for island communities, where at this moment, transplanting solutions based on Western scientific knowledge many times lead to frustration and broken dreams. In my experience, there are very concrete cases in our own islands in the fields of governance, education, finance, and so on. This is why I hope that the coming days in this conference, we will consider how we can play a role in harmonizing different knowledge systems, the Western scientific knowledge with the local knowledge authentically generated on these islands. It is an approach I will certainly entertain myself, and I invite all participants to this conference to do the same. And most importantly and significantly, thanks to our sponsors, we have more students in our midst in this conference. I believe the upcoming generation will be able and will lead the way to overcome the challenges of harmonizing these differences in knowledge systems available to humanity. For making this event possible in this way, I thank all who participated in the organization and also our sponsors. And finally, I am thankful that you have come here to share your stories with us. I wish all of us together a successful conference filled with inspiring thoughts and wonderful fellowship. Thank you.
Thank you, Rector. It's interesting, we didn't coordinate our welcoming remarks. And as I was listening to Glenn, I started crossing off things in my speech. Well, he's already said this, he's already said this. But then I stopped crossing things off because I realized, wait a second, he's just reinforcing some of the things that we believe in. And the very fact that he's saying things that I've already got written in my speech tells me that there's a sense of complementarity, a sense that as islanders, that we see things the same way. We look through the prisms of glass like this and see our islands in similar ways, regardless of how far or how distant they might be. So I stopped crossing things out. I've mentioned just briefly the sponsors. I just want to mention them by name. The representation by the Netherlands in Aruba, the Guardian Group. If I ever need insurance while I'm here, the Guardian Group is there to cover me. The Aruba Tourism Authority, the Thing to Do Institute, the University of the West of England, Aruba Alloway, Smith & Dorless Coffee, making wonderful coffee, by the way, I've tasted it already. And I should say that there have been several anonymous donors as well who were very important in allowing us to put this conference on, and I really appreciate both the named sponsors as well as those who have contributed who just don't wish to be named. I want to make sure in my remarks not to forget, and you'll hear this several times, the role of the planning committee. And the local organizing committee, it's hard to name individuals because then of course you leave people out, but I will anyway. Especially Deborah Alexander and Franchiel Lacley have played an important role and are continuing to play that important role to make things run smoothly. For those of you who go to conferences, you realize that a well-run conference is one where you don't see people because there's a lot of chaos that operates beneath the surface that's resolved without you seeing it. And it wouldn't be resolved with the efforts of often the local organizing committee. I want to make a special point as well of recognizing my colleague and friend, Laurie Brinklow, Dr. Laurie Brinklow, who has been a stalwart and has helped with this conference immensely. In fact, I helped her with the conference. So on my notes here, I said, well, how did this come to be, as Glenn mentioned? And I'm going to give it a little bit more personal twist to it. In addition to the notes that the Rector mentioned about us organizing it through a contact that we had, a Genevieve Philip Durham, who spent some time at the University of Prince Edward Island. So we established that relationship. And Genevieve was teaching at the University of St. Maarten. And so we developed that relationship, and that's why we initially reached out to the University of St. Maarten to have the conference there. And unfortunately, because of the storm, we actually wanted to, we communicated with Genève after that and said, we still want to have the conference there as a symbol of our solidarity with St. Maarten in the reconstruction efforts. But I think ultimately we said, we just couldn't at that point at the same time that we had it there. So we hope to come back to St. Maarten at some point and have another conference there, but we also welcome and know that a part of St. Maarten is here with us today. And then there was a conference in Hawaii, of all places, and both myself and Lori were in Hawaii, and we went out for dinner with the Rector. At the time, I called him the Rector as opposed to Glenn, and Franchiel. And over at dinner, we said, this is something that we want to do. We want to create this partnership. And it was a very short period of time. It didn't take long before we realized that this was a partnership that we had to pursue. And so I'm glad we had that opportunity for that dinner. I should say as well that just a comments about the University of Aruba. I come from a small university in Canada, the University of Prince Edward Island, that has only 4,500 people. And one of the phrases our premier of our province has, often both about the university as about the island, is that they use a sporting sort of analogy, a metaphor, in that the university in the island punches above its weight class, from a boxing sort of analogy. And then I started talking with my colleagues at the University of Aruba and the Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development on SNIJs, and I realized that the University of Aruba punches well above its weight class with a student population that's less than 1,000 at times. But some of the initiatives, the projects that they're doing, is not only beneficial for this island and the future generation of islanders here, but it's beneficial for all islands. So the very fact that yesterday in this building there was a signing ceremony where there's a partnership between the EU and other partners in the university and Aruba to establish and further a small island sustainability faculty in the STEM fields. That to me, that's punching, with PhD programs associated with it and funding of PhD programs in addition to bachelors. Think of that, a university with fewer than 1,000 students that are producing people that are not only the bachelor's degree graduates are going to contribute, but master's and PhD students are going to be able to contribute to the development of this university. And I think that's a testament to the work that takes place. And it's almost a microcosm of what that means about islands themselves, being able to strive and punch above their weight class as islands and as islanders. If I could just spend a few moments in terms of the purpose of this conference, and the remarks in the program say this as well, so I won't spend much time. But the purpose of this conference is to share stories, as the tagline sometimes says, but it's more than that. When you think of it, there are sort of partnerships or dichotomies that come together here. Not only is it a north-south, but it's a south-south kind of relationships that are being developed as well. Not only is it the local Aruban stories and research that's shared with those people that come from a distance, but it's all those people that come from a distance in the region and internationally who can share their own stories, their personal stories as well as the research stories. Not only that, but it's as I've mentioned several times, as my colleagues have mentioned, this is a coming together of small island states that tend to get more attention, and subnational island jurisdictions, those semi-autonomous territories, provinces, prefectures, who tend sometimes to be subsumed within a larger political entity. And we, as much as we want, as SNIJs as they're called, to be known, we tend to sometimes be considered part of a larger entity. So it's an attempt to try to put us on a little bit more even playing field with the small independent or small island states as well. And I want to end my opening remarks by also echoing the Rector's comments about strengths and vulnerabilities of islands. And it seems to me that that's also reflected in the institutions of island studies as well. It has strengths and vulnerabilities. And let me just pause for a moment to think about that, about the institutions of how we acquire knowledge and how that knowledge is disseminated. I'm a professor of island studies. There are very few professors of island studies in the world. So when you think of it from a vulnerability perspective, how is knowledge created and how is it transmitted? As much as we might want it to be an organic kind of process, in fact, it works through administrative structures and institutional structures. And that's one of the vulnerabilities of island studies, is that I can probably count on one or two hands the number of academic programs, for example, that exist in the world that teach at a graduate, at a master's level, and I think the only PhD program in a generalist island studies is at the University of Malta as well. So what does that say in terms of the ability to actually develop a knowledge base, or the language, if you want to call it that, the sense of knowing that is steeped within island studies scholarship, as opposed to geography scholarship that is my background, or economic scholarship, or sociology, or biology, or political science. I'm not denigrating those, but each of us are steeped through our professional careers and our academic careers in the jargon and our predecessors within those fields. And so that's a vulnerability when you have very few institutional structures on the academic side that create the next generation of those scholars. The same could be said for policymaking and non-governmental associations or government associations. So we think of the Association of Small Island States, for example, as a supranational organization. And it's punched well above its weight in terms of its ability to influence international bodies in terms of climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. But there aren't enough of those kinds of associations, and they sometimes can be too ephemeral. They can be too tenuous. So we need sort of more formal structures. There are those that are emerging, but I think that's a vulnerability that exists. Now let me turn that around in my last couple of comments in terms of the strengths. One is that I believe that islands and island studies is the next geopolitical sphere, if you want to call it that. Many people point to the Arctic, for example, and the Arctic Council and the University of the Arctic. The Arctic has been of geopolitical importance for a number of years. And therefore, resources have flowed into institutions that are there to study the Arctic, perhaps think about exploiting its resources, and many other things. I believe the same thing is happening, or could happen, with respect to islands of the Pacific, islands of the Caribbean, etc., in that there is an increasing geopolitical importance of small islands of the world. It could be part of the law of the Convention of the Sea and the 200-mile exclusive economic zone, etc. It could be because of the increasing strategic importance of islands in various parts of the world. But they're poised to play a much more critical role, I believe, geopolitically. The question that remains to be seen, however, is what role do islanders themselves play in the increasing geopolitical role of their own islands and the seas and the oceans around them that they've depended upon for thousands of years. Is it going to be dictated to them by other powers, or are they going to actually come together and form their own basis for understanding and appreciating those islands and those environments? And one last strength, and perhaps it's reflected here. Even though many of us are from various walks of life and various fields of training, we have a passion. And the Rector talked about the characteristics of islanders. I'm not going to pretend that we're all alike. We're automatons that have the same kinds of characteristics, but we're shaped by our personal stories, our personal upbringing, and we're shaped by our experiences. But at the base of that, there are certain kinds of shared characteristics, call it islandness if you want, that might be reflected in entrepreneurship, reflected in strong social networks and the ability to bond together and rely upon each other in times of crisis. Those kinds of things build us together and allow us to see the world differently and allow us to actually provide lessons to the rest of the world. So this isn't just something that we're doing for ourselves as islanders, but it's something that actually has incredible value for the rest of the world in the next generation. So I want you to think about that from over the next 2.5 days, and think about the role that you might make in furthering the interdisciplinary nature of island studies. And I'll stop right now, and perhaps I can call the representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to say some welcome remarks.
Governor, Excellencies, good morning, dear researchers, colleagues and friends. After having listened to Jim, I thought that when I was a young boy, I wanted to become in the Netherlands, a soccer player, or maybe a pilot, things that you want to become as a young boy. But now that I'm not that young anymore, I know what I would have liked to become. That is a professor of island life. That's a wonderful life, I would say. I'm excited to be here at this conference, being set up at the University of Aruba, located at one of the most beautiful spots universities can be located, I know. I'm happy to be here and to experience a part of it. Yeah, thank you. And most of all, I'm happy to be one of the people to welcome all of you here. And I thank the organization for this invitation. My name is Erwin Arkenbout. I'm the representative of the Netherlands. Little correction, not the representative of the kingdom, but only the country of the Netherlands for the countries Aruba, Curaçao and St. Maarten. And you know, I'm a little bit hesitating going ahead to mention those autonomous countries, subnational jurisdictions. We'll be careful, but maybe for the situation now it's okay. Before my current job, I was stationed on St. Maarten for a couple of months to oversee and coordinate the disaster relief efforts after Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Before that, I was the director of the Dutch government for kingdom relations in The Hague. And as a result, the Caribbean islands have become somewhat of a second home to me. And in fact, Curaçao is indeed my current home for now, and also for the next years to come. So I'm also proud to say that I too feel part of the stories that characterize island life. I'm building up my own stories right now. Maybe in the end of the day there will be some book. And that's why I also share the urgency to better equip our islands and communities for the consequences of climate change, to become more self-sustainable when it comes to food and energy production, or to strike the right balance between economic development and nature conservation, and to improve the level of island governance in such a way that it can meet all those very challenging things effectively. I'm also convinced, I really believe in that the umbrella of the Dutch kingdom, which makes a very special relationship between the Netherlands and the 6 Caribbean islands, is an asset. And in response to the hurricane aftermath, the Netherlands, together with the government of St. Maarten and the World Bank, is trying to invest more than 500 million euros to rebuild the Dutch Windward Islands, which is not a very process, by the way. All those challenges are and will remain crucial, and especially for small island developing states, so they deserve our continued attention. And over the years, I've seen a steady interest in island studies from Dutch researchers and also international research institutes. That's good news, I would say. Not only for scholars and students, but also for policymakers, politicians, and companies and entrepreneurs. And during my period as a director of Kingdom Relations in the Netherlands, I found regular meetings with researchers on those topics quite helpful. And I also asked graduate students to write their thesis about the topics at hand, and even invited them to spend some of their time at the ministry. And the results and discussions were always very refreshing, sometimes confronting. And you see, all those activities are important because they add fundamentals and new perspectives to our everyday work. And that's why I encourage my college, both then and now, to engage with researchers when it comes to their own policy areas. I'm very glad to admit that there is a good amount of back and forth discussions between policy making on the one hand and research on the other when it comes to the fields of island dynamics and kingdom relations. And that's something I would like to see continued and even enhanced. And that's why I think it's great that Aruba's university is helping to put island studies on the agenda by hosting this international conference. Extension, I would also like to support and to highlight the university's ambition to create an institute for governance. I would also like to thank my friend Glenn Thodé for all his efforts that he's putting into the university and to the islands of the Caribbean part of the kingdom. And I would hope that he is prepared to do that for many more years. After all, island life and island governance is distinct, it's very particular, and I think therefore a very interesting field of research. So I especially appreciate the impulse given to locally driven research and the encouragement of local and regional researchers to enter into the field. Now, ladies and gentlemen, look forward to continuing my conversations with academia on all these topics, and I look forward to seeing the papers as a result of this conference. I'm sure it will generate many more to come. So please enjoy the conference. Thank you for the invitation, and have a wonderful few days. Thank you.
So you've heard several people talk. Now you're going to have a real Aruban welcome. We have two artists who are going to perform for us over the next number of minutes. The first one who's going to perform for us is a poet by the name of Erwin de la Mara. And he's better known as the Beach Llama. And is the Beach Llama in the house? Okay. Come on up. I'm looking forward to this.
I don't know if it's a work of art, so let me not risk it. I'm sorry for the raspy voice. Let me start by saying thank you, University of Aruba, for inviting me here. Welcome, distinguished guests. Like we say in Aruba, Bombini. Bombini means welcome. I was invited here to do a little performance. To do a little performance that reflects my region and, of course, my island. Now, whether I'm the perfect subject to reflect that is up to personal opinion. But I am that I am. I am the product of my society and my environment, all reflected within the dynamic waters of my culture, the window to my soul. Though I am a little selfish when stating the fact, but it is my culture, and it is only from my humble point of view that I can talk. So sit back, relax, and listen to my narration as I give an explanation and mold my culture's definition. My culture is good morning, good evening, good night. We raise up well-mannered. Yes, it's true. And whenever one steps out of line, there's a belt waiting for you. It's hard to admit it, but if it wasn't for a little licks, I'd be in decadence or in some ditch. My culture is in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Sun burning overhead as Grandma drags me to Mass. I wishing for a ride while other parishioners with car laugh and drive past. My culture is rising up with the morning call of the surrounding fauna and giving thanks for the new day. Walking up to school and plunder some shimaruku on the way. By the way, that's cherries in Papiamento. My culture is when the dollar speaks, the quarter is quiet. One hand wash the other, and of course, you can't forget the gossip. My culture is football in the middle of the burning sun. Who'd have known getting blistered feet was so much fun? My culture is losing myself in nature's embrace, running between cacti, thorns, jumping from boulder to boulder with a big smile on my face. My culture is strolling through Main Street on a Friday afternoon, hanging out with friends, thinking and acting as if we were cool. My culture is man and woman at arms, rising with the early morning, working to make our ends meet, driving our little island's economy and industry forward without skipping a beat. My culture is backhoe, cement, hard hat, oil, lago, coastal, valero, Elmar, WEP, public sector, private sector. We can't forget those who work with our health. From 7 to 4, 8 to 5, turnaround shift, split shift, full shift. Oh shit, wait. What about our main industry, tourism? Waiters, housemen, room attendants, cooks and chefs. We ain't complaining about no stress, because in the end, island living is still blessed. My culture is carnival, bacchanal, festival, scandal, sack, asoma, smack, música, feather, body piece, road piece, prince, pancho, queen, trailer, barricade, jump up, jump in, truck, steel band, brass band, lighting parade, children parade, big parade, juve, soca, kaiso, road match, chuku chuku, gege, boom boom jam, Teolinda, road on fire, back and front, last lap, momo, ayo, and all those rhythms that make me feel so sweet. And you can't forget my Johnny Cake too. Because you know that's sweet. My culture is Radio Carina, La Maxima, Canal 90, Voice of Aruba, the Superstation, Radio Victoria, Radio Caruso Boy, Radio Kelbom, Venevisión, RCTV or RCTV, the way we call it here, Televin, Tele Aruba, Pink Panther, Bugs Bunny, Chavo del Ocho, Cantinflas, Pabo Papa, Ripiti Ghana, Barba Papa, He-Man, Thundercats, Robotech, Sawamura. Hold on. The signal drop. Go and check the antenna. Turn it until you find a sweet spot. My culture, as I said, is reflected in the salty waters and never-ending breeze. White sandy beaches and a few coconut trees. Skin tones, bronze, brown, olive, and black. All beauties for the eyes to behold, that's a fact. Let's take a ride on Eagle Beach. Either walk on the sand or jet ski on the Caribbean Sea. Maybe dive down and visit Antillas or explore Arashi Reef. Ultimately, we can sit and stare at the sunset on a beachside canopy and enjoy the warmth of the embracing spirit that my culture and my island is to me. Now, as I say, we are from the Caribbean. I'm an Aruban, born and raised, product of the Caribbean. How I would summarize that? Well, I'm born of immigrants. Yes, my mother's an immigrant. She came here from Dominica. My father is also an immigrant, and he came here from Colombia. And I was born here on this island. We are a multicultural society, a diverse one, an open and embracing one. Sometimes we have our little things, but, you know, it is who we are. Now, being from the Caribbean, one of our traditions, especially during Carnival season, is the music of Calypso. You see, Calypso is an important part of our Caribbean heritage. So much so that I would like to say that it is part of our folklore. Now, I'm going to keep it very short and give you a little sample, if you don't know what Calypso is, of what an Aruban Calypso sounds like. Di 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 do di di da 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 di da do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do 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 di 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 do da di da 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 di da do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do do do. You see, this art form is blessed. It is the voice of the voiceless. It reflects the society and it informs the community. Yes, Calypso is we poetry, giving us news and commentary, while we criticize the powers that be and shed some light on we own story. Di 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 do di di da 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 di di do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do do do. San Nicolas, known as Sunrise City, used to be the beacon of we industry. We had the world's largest refinery, and we were the center of prosperity. But when the refinery closed, a lot of businesses shut their doors. Unemployment gave us more woes. Even Mamacita, the bed turned cool. Di 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 do di di da 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 di di do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do do do. Now there's rumors everywhere. The plant's gone open for sure this year. Everyone's smiling and so happy. We gonna build back we economy. But something feel kinda odd. If you listen to news coming from abroad, it seems like we parent company almost on the brink of bankruptcy. Di 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 do di di da 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 di di do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do do do. I check a little situation. They passing so much legislation. They giving this one that piece of land and giving that one plaque about man. But still there's no solution for rising crime and for pollution. It's an alarming situation. Even criminal have the high season. Di 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 do di di da 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 di di do di 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 do 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 da da di 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 do do do. My job is done here, my friend. This little verse come to one end. I hope all I say is really clear and we find balance in our affairs. There's one last thing I must say. Respect to the artists hustling every day, even when they say your work is hobby and always want you perform for free.
So if I was a hip MC, this is where I'd say, give it up for the beach llama, I guess, right? He's already left the house. And the next Aruban welcome is from a dancer, Diana Antoinette. Okay, she's coming. very much. And if I could just tell you a little bit about that dance troupe. It comes from the School de Belle Diana Antoinette, an Aruban dance school celebrating its 50th anniversary last year. Ms. Diana Lydia Antoinette is a dance pedagogy teacher and artistic director of the school, and the school has dedicated its years to keep our Aruban folkloric dances and traditions alive, to safeguard our cultural heritage for generations to come. The dances of the Aruban island reflect a rich blend of African, European, Latin American, and Caribbean cultural influences. And the highly developed Aruban feeling for rhythm was challenged by the dance music which dominated the world at the turn of the last century, brought to the Antilles by early colonizers, as traditional accents were playfully shifted and moved about and adapted to the customs and lifestyle of the people. So you get a bit of a context for some of those dances. If I could reintroduce the rector of the university, who will now introduce our keynote speaker for this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce the keynote speaker of this morning. She is Ms. Evelina Wever-Croes, and she is the current Prime Minister and the Minister of General Affairs, Integrity, Energy, Innovation, and Government Organization for the Dutch Caribbean island of Aruba. Aside from forming the first coalition government in over 20 years, she made history by being also the first female Prime Minister of Aruba. After assuming the role of Prime Minister of Aruba, the big innovation gap and its impact on the Aruban economy became apparent. Therefore, the vision of Aruba's new government is to achieve socioeconomic resilience by accelerating the innovation capacity of the island through a human-centered approach, which she emphasizes a lot of times, putting the Aruban people at the heart of its policies. With much love and commitment, our Prime Minister's ambition is to create better opportunities for all citizens of Aruba and build a solid foundation for the younger generations that will have the task to carry Aruba into an uncertain future in a rapidly changing world. She believes taking a human-centered approach to policymaking combined with significant investment in innovation is the only way to help build a more sustainable future for generations to come. And something that is not mentioned in the notes is that I know her as a very benevolent person. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome our keynote speaker, Ms. Evelina Wever-Croes.
Bon dia, ladies and gentlemen, and a special welcome to the Governor of Aruba, Mr. Alfonso Boekhout, our special guest, the Prime Minister of St. Maarten, Mrs. Leona Romeo Marling, our guests from academia, our guests from near and far. It is an honor and privilege to welcome you to this academic conference on sharing stories of island life, governance, and global engagement. Please allow me to share some of my thoughts with you today on these very important topics. Government, and particularly island governments, are operating in increasingly unpredictable circumstances and have to deal with a diverse set of challenges. As small islands, our challenges can sometimes be even more complex than those we come across in big nations. And this is our story. From its early days, Aruba's economy witnessed exponential growth with the rise of the oil refinery, providing the local community with jobs and accelerating the development of the island. Setbacks in the oil industry opened doors for the tourism industry to make its big debut in the late 70s and 80s. When the refinery first closed in Aruba, our people were faced with a dilemma. Jobs were lost and a crisis ensued. However, through this time of uncertainty is where creativity and innovation blossomed. And I share our story with you today because Aruba, like many other islands in the Caribbean region, thrived or benefited from the exponential growth of the tourism industry and the oil sector. However, like the times of uncertainty we faced many years ago, we face challenges of the same scale today, whether driven by internal or external factors. We are blessed to be living in a nation with a tight-knit community, and being a small nation, we are bounded by the interconnectivity and the willingness of our people to do their part, to start new businesses, to help those in need, to show up every day, and to be the best that they can be. And this willingness and participation of our people is built upon trust and integrity. And this is why integrity is perhaps the single most important factor for small islands to prosper. Unfortunately, it is not always the case that people act in adherence to moral and ethical principles, not only in Aruba, I guess everywhere. And even though what is right or wrong is not always as clear as a typical Arubian sky, when this line is crossed, people often do not consider the consequences of their actions. An integrity breach has the potential to impact an entire community and its future generations. And this is why our government has set a high priority on maintaining integrity within our public sector and on setting the standard that we would wish to see in our community. Putting integrity on the national priority agenda is not something we do for political reasons. It's not even something we do for pure economic reasons. Integrity in governance is a must to safeguard the nation that many generations that have come before us have worked so hard to build and to protect our autonomy as a country. Integrity in governance is something we do for our people, for their children, for the generations to come. So you may ask, how can a small island take on this immense challenge, considering our constraints and especially our limited resources? We are doing this in phases, taking each step at a time and by cultivating trust. Trust must be earned again among our public officials. Trust must be earned among our community, and it is our commitment to rebuild this trust among our public servants and among our community. But of course, we need to have the right mechanisms in place. And one of the cornerstones of our administration is establishing an integrity policy with the aim to increase transparency, to strengthen good governance practices, and to combat corruption. This policy is based on 3 building blocks. The first one is the Bureau Integriteit Aruba. We are in the process of setting up an integrity bureau that is named the Bureau Integriteit Aruba. Second, we will establish an integrity chamber that will be in charge of reviewing the decisions of the government, especially on public procurement. And third, we will introduce a uniform corporate governance code and a supervisory body to supervise especially the state-owned companies and the private sector. The integrity bureaus, the Bureau Integriteit Aruba, its main purpose is to foster awareness. Awareness to prevent corruption within the public sector, but also to safeguard integrity by providing information on codes of conduct and core values. The Bureau's operating framework is based on the United Nations Anti-Corruption Convention of October 31st, 2003, and other international rules and regulations regarding anti-corruption. As part of the government of Aruba's commitment and efforts to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the Integrity Bureau will also contribute in a meaningful way to the realization of Goal 16, Peace, Justice, Strong Institutions, by 2030. The awareness process has already started during the last quarter of 2018. This marked the starting point for the first year of the Integrity Bureau. Aside from raising awareness, the Integrity Bureau will also function as an advisory center, giving advice on preventive integrity policy and its implementation, and also a very important role that the Bureau of Integrity has is to act as a reporting center for integrity violations. From an integration perspective, the establishment of the Integrity Bureau has been aligned with our digital transformation plans. We believe the Bureau will become a supporting factor in our strategy to digitalize government procedures on the road to e-government. We started the e-government process in mid-2018, and we are working closely with the e-Government Academy of Estonia on a national roadmap. And I'm pleased to share that we are on track to start the implementation phase by this summer, although it's always summer in Aruba, by mid this year. Having an e-government strategy is incredibly important to succeed in a small island governance in this day and age. As islands, we have an edge here. In the 21st century, our small size is an advantage for innovation. The status quo is no longer an option if we want to catalyze a sustainable economy and better serve our citizens. As true islanders, we must ride the wave of opportunity and not be threatened by the ambiguity of digital transformation. Historically, governments have set rules and procedures to ensure trust and fairness within the existing system. However, this has proven to create major inefficiencies and pitfalls due to big, complex systems, due to information silos and unclear rules. The bottom line is that e-government will help us streamline the processes, the structures, to increase transparency and to fight corruption. Our vision is to eliminate bureaucracy that has placed a burden on our economy that it cannot longer carry. And with this, we aim to improve the quality of life of the citizens. Aruba's digital transformation strategy, anchored in transparency and integrity, will ensure that our citizens receive a fair treatment and that public servants act ethically according to their morals and values. As you know, you cannot bribe a computer, but we have to start at the core, and the core is the awareness of our people. Not only to educate them on these topics, but more importantly, to protect them from outside influences. Good island governance equals good island life, in my humble opinion. This is our story. This is the story of Aruba, and it also entails the challenges that we face. May our learnings and our successes on island governance be told through the voice of our children and their children for generations to come. I wish you a very productive few days. I hope that you will all take home some great insights from stories shared during this conference. And more importantly, I encourage you to start putting ideas into action. Aruba is committed to knowledge sharing with our partners, and we look forward to continuing working with you on elevating governance in and beyond our shores. Thank you.
I wanted to thank you, Madam Prime Minister, and I believe we also sort of have a gift for the Prime Minister. Is that? And I believe our Rector is going to present that gift to the Prime Minister. I should say that although you may not necessarily open it now, Prime Minister, one of the items that we provided to you from our own university is a scarf 50th anniversary scarf, because even though I may not have a need for a scarf in Aruba, you may have a need for a scarf in Aruba. And the other one is a pottery dish from Prince Edward Island. So when you look at that, you might forget for a moment that it's that not Prince Edward Island, maybe Aruba. So thank you very much. So if I could remind you, I forgot one important element, the washrooms. Washrooms, for those of you who aren't familiar with the university, the male washrooms are to the left, my left, your right. Female washrooms are to my right, your left, okay? This is the end of the opening ceremonies. If you could, if you know that there's going to be a group photo taken. There's going to be a photo of the keynote speakers first. So if you wouldn't mind going out into the patio afterwards, and then we will, into the deck out here, and then we'll have a group photo in a few moments. And then after that, we'll have a coffee break from one of our sponsors once again. So thank you once again.